my shift too. I haven't talked to in like 2 years, and I'm 15. 15. Took me a minute. Shut up. I don't celebrate.
Okay, I don't see me.
Ah,
Let's see. Um,
I see it. You laugh.
All right, I can't see it yet.
yeah.
So, okay. All right. Well, I have to go for what I know, Jesus, because I can't see a thing. Okay, there it is. All right. Okay, everybody. Well, we welcome you in. Come on in. We're going to ask you to like, to share, invite people. This is going to be an intense discussion today. Um, Welcome. Body Integrity presents our fifth in our discussion series with our lovely panel here. And we're talking about our focus is domestic violence, post traumatic stress disorder, trauma, anger, anxiety in a COVID-19 environment. Um, Today, our featured speaker is going to be Carrier Snow. I don't know what happened to her. The girl fell off, but she'll be back. And we are going to be discussing another very delicate topic, but it can be a fiery topic, if you will, because we're dealing with physical and mental abuse and the excessive strain that this environment has placed on this already ongoing problem. So earlier this week, if you were following me, I made a post about an article that I saw from the Scottish Times, I think it was, and it documented women who were brave enough to post their pictures of having been abused. And it was a really heart-wrenching set of photos to view. And it's also it's just heartbreaking um, that people are experiencing this on a heightened level because of this environment. Um, and it breaks my heart not only to watch it from the outside, but as someone who has experienced this personally. I oftentimes find myself minimizing my experience because mine wasn't as to me, in my opinion, as horrible as what some women have experienced as far as the physical. There was some physical in my situation, but it wasn't what I see with other women. And that's probably I probably need to sit on somebody's couch about that for my minimizing the experience. But nonetheless, it was still traumatic for me in that it increased my anxiety to an astronomical level that I probably should have been in therapy for or should have been on some type of medication for, because I was actually afraid of the actual nighttime. Like, I mean, like it's daytime now. I was afraid of when it gets nighttime. And as the sun began to set, my anxiety began to escalate to an astronomical level. And as I came out of it and as I was coming out of it, I did a lot of praying. There were certain people that I confided in about my experience. Not well, a lot of people you're going to know now because of this, but a lot of people did not know what I was going through. And a lot of people are surprised, especially because they know me and they kind of know my character, and that's not something that I really tolerate. And it was just a situation that was crazy. And I learned so much from that experience. It made me kind of take my mouth off of those who are suffering through this type of abuse, because you really don't understand what it's like until you've experienced it. And I don't want anyone to experience it. So I want you to take people's word for it. I learned so many things on a spiritual level and on a natural level. One thing that I found about that spirit that comes with abuse and abusive people can be women as well as men. And I want people to understand that very clearly. There are some very abusive and manipulative women out here, as well as abusive and manipulative men out here. So it's, a lot of times we highlight men because usually they're the ones who perpetrated a lot more than women. But there are some women out here who are just as treacherous as men. So I want that point to be driven home. They may not be as physical, but the mental, the manipulation, the control, those aspects that women are good at, they are good at it. And those who are abusers, they are super good at it. And they rain terror down on these men, or if they're in a lesbian relationship, on other women. And so I need people to understand that, and to kind of broaden your scope of what you think of a stereotypical person is who is an abuser. It's not just men. It broke my heart as I was coming out of it to really come to the understanding that some people think that they don't deserve better, or that this is all that they can get, and this is all that they expect. And so they accept it and they stay in these cycles of abuse. That is heartbreaking to me on so many different levels. It's very heartbreaking. Spiritually, abuse comes attached with a spirit of control. And this particular spirit of control is all consuming. It doesn't stop until you're dead, in a sense, or until you get out of that situation. Sometimes we think that if we just give them what they're asking, that'll settle it and we'll be okay, and it doesn't, because they keep taking inches off of you, and those cycles are cycles of breaking you into whatever it is that conforming that what they want. But that spirit is all consuming, and there are other spirits that attach themselves as a result of that. You have manipulation, you have control, you have the not only the physical, but you have the mental abuse, and the isolation. And in the person that's receiving it, you have the diminishing feeling of self-worth, not wanting to socialize with people, losing who you are as a person, not knowing what you want, trying to figure out what they want. You're trying to please them on a constant basis. And it's what you have to understand is that you can't. And this thing is consuming. So it also helped me understand the abuse cycle and why the cycle keeps escalating every time you go through a cycle. And that cycle is usually they're nice, everything is going good. Then you guys get into an argument, and then you're nice, and then the argument escalates, and then there's the hitting, and then there's the apology, and then there's the lull time, and that cycle keeps repeating over and over again. And sometimes is a daily, weekly thing. Sometimes those cycles happen over a period of time, over weeks and months, and sometimes those cycles cycle through a year's time frame. And so initially when it happened to me, I was in such shock. I was like, did he just hit me? Like, did I just get hit like I was 9 to get hit? Like, I was in such shock and disbelief that he actually felt like it was okay to put his hands on me. And I was just like, I didn't even know how to digest it. And so there's that initial shock, and then you don't understand what happened, and it's a lot of confusion, and you just go through so much. And there, you want to get out of that situation. Most people do, unless you, even if, let me preface it by saying this, even if you've been through this for a long time, it's somewhere very deep down on the inside at this point, because you've cycled through so many of these cycles with your partner that you just, it becomes your norm, and it's not normal. And sometimes you become aggressive to people from on the outside who are trying to help you, because you've adjusted and you've accepted this as your normal. And the people on the outside are telling you, this is not normal, baby. You're not doing this. This person doesn't have the right to do what they're doing to you. And a lot of times that's when you get people who start keeping you at bay and telling you that, stay out my business kind of deal. And so, we just have to learn how to get the help. We have to learn how to reach down on the inside. One thing that is true that they say in the Bible is that what's in you will come out. And that is so true. And what helped me was that I had a strong upbringing, and my family always vehemently talked against that. They taught against physical and mental abuse. They told us that that was not normal, and that you don't accept that. And that I had a strong spiritual base, in that I could pray about it. I could seek in the spirit as well as the natural. And everybody doesn't have that. So today we're going to delve into that. We're going to get some definitions about what abuse and trauma is. We're going to see what it, understand what it looks like prior to COVID-19. And then we're going to understand how COVID-19 has pushed this thing forward and just increased the amounts of physical abuse that we're seeing through people. So I'm going to turn it over to our speaker, who is Carrier Snow. She is a clinician. She specializes in a million things here. Behavioral, you know what, I'm gonna let her do it, because she can run it down, and she got a lot of stuff on her resume, a lot of those abbreviated letters on her resume. So I'm gonna let her do it. So Carrier, come on and take the floor.
Woo! Thank you, Joy. Thank you. Let me get all my letters together. First and foremost, you cannot hand someone the reins after such an emotional, powerful statement. So just giving glory to God for your freedom, and that you had a faith base to go to. And I don't want to turn this into something theological, because there could be an array of people who are watching us. But I say, when it comes to mental health, you have to hold on to what you have. And some people have faith base. Some people have a strong family. It really depends. And one thing I really like that you spoke on is the cycle of abuse that happens in domestic violence, particularly. But one thing that you'll hear a lot when you talk about mental health is that it's cyclical. For instance, in depression, you feel down, you feel depressed, your levels are dropping in your brain. So you go and you lay in the bed and you get some sleep, but you sleep all day, which makes you more depressed. So you lay in the bed, so it's you tend to repeat cycles. And the same thing happens in domestic violence. And domestic violence is probably the most common form of trauma that we are acquainted with. A lot of us, we all know about domestic violence. We know that it's real, and it's a form of trauma. And it's not only traumatic to the person who is experiencing the violence, but if there's any kids around, it's extremely traumatic to children. Just imagine, hearing your mom, or depending upon a relationship, your dad, um, going through something like that. I need someone to share the link on my page, please. I can't go in between Facebook and Zoom right now because it kicks me off of Zoom. I'm sorry.
No worries. We
Okay.
got you.
I want people to be able to understand what's going on here with mental health. So there's so many different types of trauma. A lot of people are familiar with PTSD, post-traumatic stress. So that's another form of trauma that occurs from, let's say, like a domestic violence situation, or we've heard of wartime trauma. A lot of our older people would call it, they used to call it shell shock. Now we know PTSD. So there's different forms of trauma. And what we really want to do, what I want to do, my goal is to narrow it down to talking about trauma that is happening, or that's most likely to happen during this COVID-19. So we're all in the house, right? We're supposed to be in the house. We're not throwing house parties with 1,000 people showing up. All right. So the thing that comes to mind, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words because my agenda is someplace else, but I got a little handwritten, so I'm gonna get through this, y'all. So the most let's step back. Let me step back. I want to define trauma. I want to go around. I don't want this to be me preaching to you guys for 20, 30 minutes. I want to involve the panel because anyone who has been here for the previous conversations understand that we touch on trauma every single time that we talked about any mental health. So we talked about what trauma is, and we talked about some of the outcomes of trauma. So I do definitely want to involve the panel. And not only are we talking about PTSD, but there are studies that suggest like early childhood trauma can lead to other maladaptive behaviors that are adaptable when it's going on, but as you become an adult, it can lead to other personality disorders, or bipolar disorder is another thing that has a lot to do with environment as well as heredity. So trauma in early childhood can also bring about other mental disorders, mood disorders. So that's one thing that we're going to touch on. But trauma itself is, for you to have trauma, you have to be exposed to an environment where you fear for your life, or you fear for someone else's life, right? You're witnessing this, or it's happening to you. Okay. That's a traumatic, that's what we look at when we start talking about criteria for things like post-traumatic stress disorder, which is common in abuse victims. But what we tend to overlook outside of it, not particularly clinicians, because we are trained to look for that, but as lay people, what would you see as trauma? Well, one thing we want to definitely make valid is everybody's experience. What might be traumatic to one person may not be for another. Children have an amazing sense of bounce back, what we in psychology would call resilience. So in some cases, experiencing a trauma where you're young, you might have a resilient child who that doesn't necessarily affect negatively. Maybe they can take that trauma and move forward and use it as something positive and learn from it. But unfortunately, we also have people who experience a trauma, are damaged by it, and they either go into some type of anxiety disorder such as PTSD, or they become and repeat the cycle of abuse. One thing that I love about all of us on this panel being believers is that we can look at our scriptures and understand whatever happens in the physical manifests in the spiritual. So if you're going through it physically, you're going through it spiritually, and there is a spiritual answer. But for those other people who don't hold on to that, like, whatever is going on mentally for you it can also go on physically for you. So if you're experiencing a traumatic situation, your mind is going to adjust. And I'm pulling out let me take my time. You're going to experience, your mind is going to do something to cope with the trauma that's going on. It's a survival technique. So a lot of these acronyms that we throw around, like PTSD or some type of acute anxiety disorder, which is AD. Yeah, that's right. They're your mind's way of coping with this difficult stress that you go under. So we define trauma as something that is somebody give me a better definition, because I've gotten stage fright. Tiffany, go ahead. Let's turn her on. Nope. Anybody want to give another definition for trauma?
You got the D5-9, Cherie. What did it say, girl?
Yeah, DSM-4, DSM-5.
You just had it, girl.
I know. I have it. Like
no, Cherie just had the DM5.
DSM.
Or you want to chime in, Bernetta, and give it?
No, I was just saying DSM. But a traumatic experience is anything that happens that threatens our safety, our physical safety, our emotional safety, our feeling of security.
Thank you, Bernetta. You brought me back down to earth. You always.
And
so with that said, like when we start talking about trauma, it's anything. So what's traumatic for you might not be traumatic for me. All right. So we have to, but to fit a certain criteria for the actual disorders, it needs to be life-threatening for you. Okay. So it could have been, you might have experienced some trauma. For instance, the World Trade Center, not only did the people in there, but the people who are watching it experience some trauma, right? So, but the people who are really going to who would be classified as PTSD are the people who went through it and who saw it in person, not those of us who were traumatized by seeing it on television. Although some therapists would say that that's enough. You know, just watching it on TV would be enough. So,
absolutely, Carrie. I think vicarious trauma is real. It's absolutely real. Whether we're there or not, even us as clinicians experience vicarious trauma when we're treating people who have trauma symptoms.
And that is one reason why clinicians should always have clinicians. That is one reason why we need therapists, and we are not allowed to be our own therapists, even though we might try. So,
Tiff, you were gonna chime in. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna kind of echo what you guys were saying and what Bernetta was saying. It's not only the experience of the emotional shock from the stressful event, but it is also, you know, the people around you viewing that behavior. So when we talk about, there's one thing about how we diagnose these disorders, but you can experience trauma and not have a diagnosed disorder. For example, you know, I work with athletes, and physical injuries are traumatic.
Yes, they are.
It is very traumatic. And we don't necessarily always give a diagnosis, but again, like I said a few weeks ago, we want to treat the person. We don't always have to focus on the label.
Right. Yes. So that just goes back into to saying what is traumatic for one person. You know, physical, especially if you're an athlete, you're looking at the end of your career. But other forms of violence, definitely victims of rape, witnessing a homicide, being involved in a shooting. These are things that happen a lot where we live. You know, so we have a lot of young people out there who have lost people. That's traumatic. Losing a friend, whether you're young or old. And as I bring it back down, and that's been my problem is I'm trying to relate this to COVID-19, but then my mind is wandering everywhere, and I want to talk about trauma as a whole, where a lot of the situations that we are put in, young people who have lost other people, older people right now, losing family members and not being able to be there for them, and not being able to, whether they're in the hospital and you want to spend time with them, or you lost them and you're not able to grieve because you can't have a funeral. These are all traumatic experiences, and the body reacts to trauma in different ways. There's different type of diagnosable disorders that you can have, but I don't want to concentrate so much on what the diagnosable disorders are. I want to talk about what we can do right now to deal with trauma when you're in the house.
Okay.
For instance, as we talk about domestic violence victims, I know almost every time that I have come on this panel, we talk about the increase of domestic violence during COVID-19. Well, I think one main reason, if we use our common sense, one thing that uh, we can say about the COVID-19 is that people are stuck in the house with their partners. So, as you get irritated and anxiety builds up, you have more likely the likelihood of there being violence also goes up. And then you have young people in the house who are reliving this trauma over and over again. Um, Illness, as a person becomes sick and ill, it's traumatic to the person who becomes ill, and it's also traumatic to those family members who love them. So what do we do? What do we do in the age of COVID-19 when we're coming across trauma? Well, I like to have I like to have different solutions for different people because everybody's different. I always suggest journaling, art projects. These are things that I work with my clients, but I'm usually there to help guide them through that. The number one thing that you want to do during COVID-19 is make sure that you're in a safe place. Physical safety before mental, before anything. If you are in a situation where you can be experiencing and re-experiencing trauma, even during COVID-19, there are places for you. There's a National Center for Domestic Violence. They have a hotline that's available. There are several centers here in the city that deal with DV, which is domestic violence victims, that are available, even just by calling 311 here in Chicago. Thank you, Cherise. Sarah's Inn is one place that is available to deal with domestic violence. One thing that we do not have is enough resources for male victims of domestic violence. Traditionally, we see domestic violence as a woman being the victim and a man being the perpetrator. But now, it's 2020. We have male on male couples, we have female on female couples. So anybody can be a victim of domestic violence. And yes, even in heterosexual couples, men can be the victims of domestic violence. And that's one thing that we as women have fought so long for equality, and fought so long to have these type of centers where women can get help. But there also needs to be centers for men who are victims of violence. So coping with trauma. I think I think I'm off an agenda. Where are we on our agenda, Joy? Unfortunately, I don't have it.
So we're kind of still defining like what is trauma versus what's anxiety, so that people can have an idea of those difference. Because sometimes I think that people kind of lump them as the same, that when they have a trauma, they automatically associate that with it's having anxiety. And I don't think that that's necessarily true.
Okay, so you're right. What you just mentioned is a causal relationship. It's not trauma or anxiety. You can have a trauma and that trauma can cause anxiety. Okay. But you can't have an anxiety that causes trauma. You see, it can't be the other way around. Okay, so just so I'm not gonna bring up, okay, there's that one or two exceptions to the
right. It's there
for the most part, yeah. Anxiety is a reaction to trauma. It can be a reaction to trauma. It's not something that happens on its own. Anxiety can be caused for a myriad of different reasons. But as far as we're talking about trauma, it's a reaction to trauma. It's not something that happens on its own. And we've already defined trauma as something that's harmful, something that you can risk your life or other people's life are at risk. You know, that's going to be a traumatic experience. But what's trauma to other people? Maybe if you're a kid, getting your butt whooped is traumatic for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I was getting spanked, when I was getting beat when I was little, I thought I was gonna die.
We all
But
do.
that's a traumatic experience, and I'm not coming down on anybody's parenting. That's a traumatic experience. The purpose of the whooping itself is to create a small amount of trauma, so you don't repeat that offense,
behavior. Mm-hmm.
right? So, but that is a traumatic experience. So now I'm stuck in the house with the person who whoops my butt, and it's traumatic for me. I don't really want to deal with that. Like I said, physical safety is a paramount. It's the number one thing. Avoidance of that traumatic experience, and a lot of times can be enough.
Yeah. Tiff, you want
or that experience. Go ahead, Tiff.
Yeah, she wanted to chime in.
And I was just going to say that this is where that anxiety is a response and it develops, because once you experience, if we just use the example of a corporal punishment in the home, you develop a response of worrying, feeling nervous and uneasy all of the time. And that's what anxiety is. And so if you're excessively worrying, because now let's bring it to COVID-19, you're in the house with the perpetrator of this violence all of the time. So where school used to be an outlet or extracurricular activities were an outlet for a child, if they're experiencing excessive corporal punishment, their anxiety is going to increase through the roof.
Yeah,
Like
that little knot feeling in the stomach before they're definitely gonna experience a lot of anxiety. And hunger is another thing. As Tiffany was speaking, it made me think about, kids going to school. Hunger is traumatic. Not having a lack of just food enough to eat, that's a traumatic situation. And that can increase right now because we have schools closing, and people are able to go and pick up the sandwiches. I know my boyfriend's siblings, they went and got the sandwiches. There were like sandwiches and raw carrots. And if that's all you have to eat, that's important to have. But now knowing that school isn't open and there's already a lack, now instead of having to provide one meal a day, I have to provide 3 or more, for my kids. That's a traumatic experience. So reaching out to somebody, not necessarily, you don't have to have a professional in every situation, as we spoke about earlier. Some things are more traumatic than others. So you don't necessarily have to, every traumatic situation is not going to lead to an encounter with a professional.
Right.
In some situations, just being able to call a friend, having somebody to talk to, having somebody to bounce ideas and stuff off is important, because everybody should have access to a counselor, but not everybody is willing to go to one.
Yeah.
So whether go ahead.
So I was just going to say that. So from what I'm gathering, just listening to you, this is such it's a complex topic that we're trying to kind of minimize and trying to drive home a simple point in that, trauma there's so many branches that come from trauma and what trauma can feed into, and knowing that every trauma doesn't mean that you have to lead to a diagnosis, but that, some traumas we can rectify in our minds, such as the spanking. We knew mama or daddy or whoever told us, don't eat the cookies right now to wait. We ate them, we got a spanking. So we know that next time when they tell us not to do something, that we'll be more inclined to be
Did joy freeze for everybody?
A person who feels that they already have their own personal issue, and that then they want to take their own personal issue and kind of impose it or project on someone else as a recipient, which would be in the, it seems that they could have some of these other generalized disorders and then project their outbursts or symptoms of these disorders on people in the form of domestic violence and or stealing or whatever it, those manifestations are.
So that's not really dealing with the trauma itself. That's dealing with, a person's reactions. Why do they become an abuser? Why
Okay.
what has happened? One thing that we can look at is a lot of times abuse is cyclical. We're looking at these cycles again. A lot of times people have experienced abuse, so they perpetrate abuse. It is not always, and definitely not always when we start talking about sexual abuse. But definitely when we start talking about physical abuse in the household, a lot of times a child is going to do what they see. They're not going to do what you tell them. They're going to do what they see. So if the mother is in an abusive relationship where she's taking on abuse, then the son learns that it's okay to abuse women, and the daughter learns that it's okay to accept this level of abuse, right? So that's it. We really don't. I don't personally try to get into why people perpetrate traumas. That's for different therapists.
Okay.
I deal with how. Yeah, let's send it to Tiffany. I deal with how do we deal. I deal with what's going on right now. I'm being abused, and this is how I feel about it.
Okay.
And we remove that person from that situation. But we're talking. Once we remove that person from that situation, then there's mental work that needs to be done. That's when we deal with what's going on with me that I would allow this type of abuse. Why do I always pick these type of people? For COVID-19,
wait before you go in there. Let me hear what Cherie was going to say, and then Bernetta.
I just wanted to add that although we're talking about domestic violence and we're talking about abuse, the domestic violence, you can still get an order of protection for domestic violence. Now, even though the courts are closed, you would just need to contact 311 if you're in the city of Chicago, and they will direct to you what it is that you need to do should you feel like you need a temporary order of protection.
Oh, that's good to know, because I didn't think they were open like that. Okay, Bernetta.
And I was just going to say, thinking about the current environment that we're all living in, the COVID environment, it's almost intuitive that the numbers of calls for support and help would increase because we're forced to shelter in place. We're isolated from any of the support systems that we typically would have. And it makes it a lot easier for someone who doesn't have the coping skills to victimize someone else. We're together all the time. Now, you were getting on my nerve before. Now you're really getting on my nerve. Now I'm really tired. And there's nowhere I can go. I can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. So what happens is they default to those behaviors that they're accustomed to, that they're familiar with. And they're not effective coping mechanisms, but that's what they know. So they default to that. And being in the house together, they are oftentimes the perpetrators are going to attack the weakest, the least responsive victim.
One other thing I want to add, as I was putting the website to domestic violence helpline, I did it on my telephone, and they are monitoring that site 24 hours a day, and it tells you as soon as you log in that you're being monitored. And so if you're in a safe place to actually call them. And so if we have people that are listening, that is still a source for help.
Wow. Okay, that's great.
And I don't know if it's on that site or not, but I know that so many people, I know that so many people are acutely aware that they're offering support. So if you call this particular number and you say, I want to order a number 5 with extra cheese and whatever, then that is an indicator to them that there's a problem and they can send help.
Yes.
I think you can call when you call the police, there's some kind of code language, right? Some code language that you use so that the perpetrator doesn't recognize that you're calling for help.
Sure, that's great.
I think we saw the commercial, the large pizza order.
No, I haven't seen that.
haven't
Oh,
seen
you
it.
haven't? It's an old one where there's a DV situation and she orders a large pizza and they're like, the police are like, "This is the police. Yeah, I know where I'm calling. I need a large pizza."
Okay.
So, and I stated earlier that 311 is a resource. It's a wonderful resource if you're here in this area to call. Even with help with COVID-19, with hunger, they have food pantries and whatnot that are throughout the city. The 311 is a resource for domestic violence, for other for partner violence, whether if you're dealing with like roommates or family members or whatever. Um, Now, how do we relate this to COVID-19? One thing Bernetta said, we're in the house with each other. So what are our resources? What do we do? Um, Now we're not talking about a case where you're actively in harm's way, but trying to make sure that you have something to do outside of being with your abuser. Okay, I'm coming through where I'm hearing background.
Oh
Is that
no, you okay? That was
okay?
me.
So occupying your abuser. If there's been past abuse and there's not something that's going on now, definitely making sure that you have something to do, that you're able to. Some people are still able to work. Um, some people are. My phone is doing things. Some people are still able to work and able to leave the house, and that is going to help in some situations. But I didn't want to relate this particularly just to domestic violence, because the answer for domestic violence is to get out. Although we know that a woman is 75% more likely to be abused when she leaves her abuser than she is when she's with him. And there are resources for that. I think we've touched on that. But what we're talking about is a person who has experienced trauma and now is in the house. Let's say the abuser is not there anymore. You're alone and you could be dealing with anxieties. What do you do? The phone is a great tool. What we're doing right now is a great tool. Having Zoom conversations with friends and family, having Zoom conversations with or just traditional telephone conversations with domestic violence centers. All of these things are still available to you. You just have to do them in a different way. Um, it can be claustrophobic to a lot of people to be stuck in a house. People can experience claustrophobia. And that's an anxiety response to being in a tight, closed space. But I promise y'all, every time I walk around my house, it gets smaller. It gets smaller. So, how do we deal with that type of anxiety? Now, we're in a better place. So what I recommend is getting busy, having something to do. I've been working on projects like crazy, and this isn't everybody's thing. I'm a crafter, so I've been crafting like crazy. Exercise. A big portion of these conversations that we're talking about is how physical exercise can help with our mental health situations. Trauma is definitely no different. Anything that you can use to occupy your mind and think and do other things, especially if it's helpful, if it's healthy, I recommend doing it. Physical exercise is amazing. It releases endorphins in the brain. These are the brain's natural happy pill and natural painkiller. So being able to do things like yoga, any other stretching, to even high impact exercise can really work out for people. And there are so many resources. In addition to what Joy is going to do, there are exercise programs that are available to you for free. You don't need to necessarily pour any money into this. You can go on YouTube. You can go on the different exercise websites. They have 30-day trials, and a lot of people are doing. I know Fit Code Bootcamp. That's my boot camp. They're doing. They had a free workout this morning at 8 a.m. So a lot of places are doing things to help people deal with this shelter in place situation. You just have to be willing to look at some of them. Anybody want to speak on what we should do?
Well, Carrie, I just want to add, you gave us some, I just want to reiterate, I guess, you gave us some wonderful solutions for us to just start trying to deal with our anxiety and trauma and different things. So I kind of jotted them down, but I have journaling, I have exercise, which Joy is the expert in that. Connecting with other people, even if it's not in a Zoom conversation, but text message, reaching out to people that you've not been able to reach out to, or if you're just thinking about people to say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. I just wanted to reach out to you. If you don't want to pick up the telephone, text messaging. There's an app called House Party, which I'm just newly familiar with, but it's kind of like FaceTime, but you can add other people and you can lock the room and different things. It's great. And I use it with my parents because they necessarily can't come to the house, but my 9-year-old wants to see her grandparents. And so that's what we use to make sure that we connect with them and we can actually physically see them and their expression and conversation. And so I think that's great. And so it's a free app. So it's not like you have to pay for it, but that's part of still connecting with people. Bernetta gave us last week, thebomb.com, the meditation piece. And so being able to still use meditation, using the apps such as Headspace and Calm, which is my favorite. I need to get some stock in them because I'm using them all the time.
I have both of them.
But being able to have a meditation and be in a meditative state in order to bring that anxiety down, that Dr. Bellamy shared with us, just being able to be in that moment and to bring that calmness down. So these are some great solutions that I wrote down because I'm going to use them for real. But just being able to be connected to other people, I think is the biggest thing, even in being in the COVID-19 thing, is just being connected to folks, because everyone is in need of connection, love, togetherness. And so using some of these solutions will help us stay while we're in the place and beyond.
Especially with our older people, we need to recognize that they're out there and they might not be as up on a lot of these apps.
Sure.
I heard about House Party from you, so thank you very much.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely reaching out to a lot of older people. Loneliness, isolation, just being alone, that's when your mind has time to unwind and think about a lot of things that we suppress and a lot of things that we try not to think about. So that's why I keep reiterating, keeping yourself busy and finding something to do.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sheree.
I was just going to say, Sheree was talking about connecting with folks and reaching out. And one of the things that really stands out to me is kindness. And being kind to ourselves, which means giving ourselves permission to feel anxious, to be worried, to be frustrated, and then and being okay, like knowing that that's all right, and then being kind to folks around you. Taking that extra step to reach out to somebody. Hey, how's your day going? Or, child, let me tell you, I went to the store the other day, and do you know how much it costs for 3 bananas now? But making that extra effort makes so much difference. And it's funny how when we help others, we help ourselves.
Yeah.
That's huge. So reaching out and making that phone call to somebody that maybe you haven't talked to in a while, or maybe you have and you just want to talk to again, something will come out of that conversation that you needed as well. So being kind to yourself, being kind to others, and taking the risk and reaching out.
Okay.
Sheree talked to Renetta talks about connecting. Sheree talks about reaching out to others, and let's not forget our spiritual base. Prayer changes things.
Yes, it does.
So when you're in there, and I know for me, having lived through trauma, experienced trauma, and then having had the opportunity to work with people who've dealt with trauma, I have always needed to unburden myself by praying. I can't hold on to it, so I give it to the Lord. And
that's the perfect place. That's the perfect shoulders to put it on.
Yes. Take care of it all. Jesus.
Yes.
Take this.
Yes.
Take it all.
Mm-hmm.
These are all appropriate responses to having lived through something traumatic. We're looking at a different situation right now, and I think we're making up the rules as we go because we haven't been, well, my generation, excuse me, I apologize, but we haven't lived through trauma like this. This is a situation. This is traumatic. I get on the line and I read some of the theories that people believe that are going on. Honey, it's traumatic just to read it. They think that they're spraying the air with COVID-19 and we only have days to live, and this is a maladaptive response to this particular stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I said. One of the things I said last week, Harriet, that was disconnecting from social media, from the news, from all of the negativity, from everything extra.
Right.
Just all of those inputs, because it's so much. We're inundated with it in every realm of our lives. So in being intentional about shutting down sometimes, like, you know what, today is going to be a no Facebook day. I might watch the news for a few minutes in the morning, and then I'm going to go about my day, because our minds are constantly inundated with something related to it. My daughter had a current events assignment given from school, and she's like, I want to do a current events that's something other than COVID-19, and I can't find anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how significant is that? Like, it's difficult to find a news story that's not solely COVID-19.
Right.
So disconnecting from some of that is really important too.
You know,
Yes.
I was talking to my coworker as we were leaving work yesterday. We were walking to our parking garage, and I told her, I said, I am so straight down the middle on this issue about opening up versus not opening up, and self-quarantine and things of that nature. And explaining to her, one of the things I can't do is live in fear,
Mm-hmm.
because that fear keeps you in such an area of worry and anxiety, and you're so stressed out because you're fearful. Like, well, what if it's here? And what if I touched this there? And what if I did this there? And what if I brought it in the house on my shoe? And what if it came in on my coat? And and it's like, I can't live in total fear like that, because I will not be any good. And
That's right.
just even trying to look at the scientific rationale for me, it's like, I've come up with two theories. They're my own personal theories. I don't have any research team with me behind it, but just understanding how most viruses and bacterial infections work, then I know that two things happen here. Either COVID has been here since the beginning of flu season, which is end of August, early September, and they just didn't know what it was, because there were several cases of people being sick with these same group of symptoms that tested negative for strep, influenza A and B, and for pneumonia. And they just documented them as a upper respiratory infection. They gave them a Z-Pack and they sent them on their way. Or this thing was truly released. It's one of the two, because most pandemics, they don't, viruses don't react like that or act like that unless TV. You understand what I'm saying? Like, in a TV scenario, you get this virus and 2 days later it's halfway across the world. Like, it doesn't happen like that.
I don't want to create a fear response.
No, we're not going to create a fear response.
Because viruses do react exactly the way, it starts someplace and then people are traveling with it, and then
they do, but it doesn't become to a pandemic numbers that rapidly unless that strain is that virulent. So then we have to look at the virulence of the virus. And so I'm saying all that to say that, we have to be smart about this COVID-19 and how we are reacting. We must protect ourselves, and we must continue to live because, you know, this is, like you said, we've never seen this in our lifetime. We read about the bubonic plague. We read about the 1918 influenza. We read about that stuff. We've never experienced type of level of trauma or contagion in our lifetimes. This is something that we only hear and or read about. And so it is having a huge impact on people. And I think sometimes people don't even realize that maybe because this is a large scale trauma to everybody, I think that some people don't even realize that as a result, they have developed some anxiety and they don't even realize that they developed some anxiety. You know what I mean? Like they all of a sudden they find like, I need a go. You know what I mean? And they never used to do that prior to 19. I don't think that people realizing that they have their bodies and their minds have developed these coping techniques that they didn't even realize that they were doing. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you didn't even, I didn't even know that was what it was. You know what I'm saying?
A response. You know, when we respond,
they don't even know that they're having a response.
And usually we don't develop the response until it's over, you know. But a lot of people right now, they have heightened anxiety, but you're like, PTSD is not going to develop until your body has to get yourself through the trauma. You know what I'm saying? It gets through, and then, you know, it responds how it responds. And for some people, that's generalized anxiety disorder. For some people, that's post-traumatic stress disorder. That's the reliving of the trauma we talked about. Actually, we didn't. So we only have about 5 minutes, and I do want to talk about some of these things. These that we brought up before, like PTSD is a reaction to trauma, and that's the reliving of the traumatic situation over and over again. As different from an anxiety disorder, where, let me break this down. PTSD is in itself an anxiety disorder. It's just a particular type of anxiety, right? Okay. So you're reliving that stress. You could have an acute anxiety disorder. You could have a dissociative reaction with your anxiety where you dissociate even the event. Some people forget.
What does that look like, Carrier? Because I heard you kind of say that before. Like what, I understand you mean like you kind of like, you trying to separate into two worlds or something, like what happened versus how you live in. Like, what does that look like for people? Just some examples, because I know that this is so broad and it affects people may disassociate differently. And so I know it's like no straight answer, but kind of like, what does that kind of look like?
Well, in some, like this is some, when you're disassociating, you could become like numb to the situation, or you could become numb overall. Like the feeling is so great that you lose feeling. I can't even process this. I can't deal with this. So I'm numb, and then I'm detached. You have no emotional response to it.
I would say it's like you're looking on the outside, like you're looking at a picture and you're looking outside of that picture while the story is playing over and over again. Your story is playing
and you're witnessing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that would be disassociative behavior. You're looking at the story, like that's me, I think, you know, because you cannot identify with it.
So do you not? So when you're disassociating, you're kind of like, is it not in your mind? Is it like not real for you? Like you see it, like you see it, but you like, oh, but that's not me. I feel sorry for that person.
Well, I'm looking at the criteria.
Joy, you remember, I think it may have been 2 weeks ago during our panel, you talked about experiencing something when you were younger. Someone scared you so much that you couldn't move. Yes. You saw stuff happening. You saw the situation playing out, but you couldn't do anything.
Okay. Yes.
That's an example of that. You know, you are in that freeze mode where things were still happening and you saw it and you recognized it, but you couldn't do anything to be a part of that.
Right.
Okay.
So you have that as a dissociative disorder. I mean, it can go as far as like this dissociative amnesia, where you have no, the DSM calls it an inability to recall important aspects of the trauma. This happens, I see it a lot with victims of sexual abuse.
Okay.
They're like, I don't, and I'm not talking about when they're drugged. They're like, I don't quite remember how it happened or what happened. But I know that it did happen. So these are like the numbing, the detachment, absence of emotions. A lot of, for me to bring it down, is that some people say they have a feeling of being dazed.
Okay.
You know, like I'm walking along and I just kind of don't know what's going on. Like of marijuana, I assume.
Yeah.
I would never know. But that dazed feeling, that's something that you could see a lot in an acute stress disorder. Some people from trauma develop some type of generalized anxiety where they're just anxious over everything and nothing in particular. And they have a knotted feeling in their stomach and a feeling that they're a foreboding, like something dark is coming, something heavy is over me, but I can't necessarily point to what that is. So these are trauma responses. And that's why trauma is so, if you imagine living with one of these, as I've explained them, that's why it's so important that we address it. When I said earlier that not every trauma response means a clinician, we're talking about the difference between being popped on your wrist for doing something bad to witnessing someone being shot next to you or being a victim of some type of sexual or physical abuse. They run the gamut. So I don't want to leave the ideal out there that trauma doesn't need a clinician. It definitely does. But most of us don't need to talk to someone because we got put on punishment.
Right. And I think
that wasn't trauma to us.
Right.
But
and somehow our minds can heal from that trauma and not internalize it as like this has to go on and on and on. We can kind of rationalize, okay, mama said don't take out the flour and we took it out anyway, and so now we're on punishment, and we can kind of say, well, the reason why I'm on punishment is because I took the flour out, and that's kind of it. Whereas some traumas can take us down the rabbit hole.
The relationship is important. You know, I also realized, okay, I have a great relationship with my mom. She loves me. She cares for me. This is not what usually happens. This is a response to something that I did versus a child who lives through perpetual abuse and is being abused for everything, right? So therein lies the difference. You know, I'm a loving, supportive home, and I also get love and support and care versus I don't get any of that, but I get the beatings. Now that's the difference between going down the road to an anxiety disorder versus I got my butt whooped, I know better.
Right. Okay.
So I definitely want to point these out. And a lot of these disorders that are out there, and believe me, there are more.
I know.
Joy is I don't want to try to encompass all the reactions of trauma in this conversation. I really want to focus on what's common, basically. You know, what's common and what people may be dealing with at home. And for those, let me say this. For those of who have claustrophobia, for those who are what's commonly called as cabin fever, anxiety is a natural response to stimuli. It is over response that creates these disorders. I mean, you feel knotted up on the inside and you got to get out, put your mask on and go outside for a walk. You know, there's no martial law. You don't have to just stay in the house. Go for a walk your dog, you know, put your mask on, be safe, use common sense. And I know common sense isn't that common, but one thing that we want to get back to is the use of common sense. You know, if you know somebody struggles with one of these disorders, or you know you have a friend that's kind of anxious, reach out. You don't necessarily, another thing that we should bring up before we go is that you don't have to necessarily talk about the trauma to get relief from it, right? That's one thing I deal with I used to deal with my patients. You don't have to relive what you went through to get past it. A lot of times, you know, I hate when if somebody makes you recount what you've gone through. You can re-traumatize your clients that way. People can be re-traumatized when you say, "Oh, tell me what happened." You have to let that happen organically. You know, let people tell you when they are ready, but that doesn't mean that you can't be there for them. You can be the friend that they go for a walk with. You know, you could be the person that I call to have a conversation and get my mind off of what this anxiety is doing to me. So really, while we have this shelter in place and we're worried about what we can do for each other, I think that Renata said if I'm, or I don't know who said kindness. I
Sure,
thought it was, yeah, it would be Renata. So kindness is important because I truly believe what you put out, you get back. So being able to put that out there as we wrap this up for over an hour, being able to put positive, and that's not natural for some people. Believe it or not, being positive is not natural for some people. So working on that and working on what you want to get back, that is really the best way to respond to anxiety that's caused by trauma in this particular setting.
Well, I like what you brought up because it's a technique that I employ with my clients naturally, and not knowing that it was like a clinical technique that you all do. And that is, a lot of times we talk before we work out because I want to know how your day was. How are you feeling mentally and physically? Because I do understand that those positions or where you are, that impacts your ability to work out, to focus, to concentrate, and to even bring the physical aspects into working out. It impacts it, and it impacts it greatly. And I think that sometimes some trainers are misguided in thinking that people are just being lazy or trying to find excuses and not understanding that the mind is really a powerful tool, and that, you know, to think that we're only using what they say 10% of our minds,
That's not true.
and how extraordinary we are as people with using just that small amount of our minds. To me, that's so incredible, and it speaks to the true power that resides in us with our minds. And so it's important, to talk to people to understand so that we can get the best. Even as an athlete, if your mind is not in the game, you're not going to perform well. I know that from running track. People, have bad basketball games, volleyball, tennis, everything.
All that. All that.
Your mind, or just because and I'll use Derrick Rose for an example. So when he got hurt, and he first came back before he injured his other knee, I kept saying he should not be playing because I'm watching his body language. He did not trust his knee. Mm-hmm. He was not confident in whatever rehab, whatever they did. He was not confident in it. And so he wasn't playing confidently. And I could see that. And I know people are like, how you see that? I mean, that my specialty is human movement. So when I'm watching his body, I'm like, this boy needs to be set down. He needs to call it a year and finish rehabbing for the rest of this year and over the summer and come back, because he's gonna hurt the other knee. And sure enough, 3 or 4 games later, this boy out and the other knee jacked up. And I'm like, they rushed him. I feel like they rushed him back. It's all about money and politics and all that crap. But no one cared about, as a trainer for me, I would have told him when I saw him, I would have pulled him. I would have taken him off of the list and I would have said he's not ready. He's mentally not ready. He doesn't trust whatever we did, he doesn't trust. There's a disconnect mentally and with his body physically. There's a disconnect. And so we need to work on some other things. And so I think that as a trainer for me, that sometimes I talk to my clients and they're telling me they had a bad day and they're stiff and they can't move. We're not working out. We're just going to talk because I want to make sure that you're okay. I want to be an outlet for you. And we're going to pick that up on the next session. And we're going to talk about some strategies for you to get through, because sometimes we work in stressful environments. So I can't, every session we can't put off. But when I know that somebody is really like at their limit and they're not there, I'm not going to train you because you're prone to injury now because you're not there, right? And so I need you to be there. It's one thing to be stressed out and be able to still focus, get that out through the workout, and it comes out through a good workout. And man, we had the bomb workout. I went past what I normally do because I was able to push. And you walk away feeling like $1 trillion, like you just feel priceless. You like, man, I did the thing today. Versus you're so stiff and you're so disconnected with this workout because of what happened. No, we need to talk. This session needs to be dedicated to talking, working on some strategies to help out for both at home, on the job, and when we work out again. And so I think that, a lot of times we're always, even in this environment, we're pushing people. I see a couple of different pages and people pushing and posting, I ran 1,000,000 miles today. What did you do? You was just sitting on the couch. No, don't do people like that, because mentally we don't know where they are. And it's important to address the whole person. Now I don't try to sit in the position of a counselor the way that you ladies are, but I do have some basic skills, to help you with some different things. And then I will refer you out. Now, if I think it's a bit much, I will refer you out. I know some good people.
I don't know. You know a lot of therapists. I think maybe you missed your other calling. And then you're like, you need to journal and we need to talk about how you're feeling. And I'm like, Joy,
girl, but you know what's crazy is that I did take a lot. I was going to make psychology my minor in college. What's crazy, I just didn't. French ended up being my minor, but it's just we have to encompass the entire person. I'm gonna get some final thoughts, and then we're gonna try to get out of here in the next 6 minutes. Get out of here. Anybody?
I really like, Joy, how you holistically look at the person. Dr. Tiff a couple weeks ago talked about, and you also said, Joy, the mind-body connection. I started out my talk with, we are fearfully and wonderfully made on purpose. What happens inside manifests outside. So all of the little tips and strategies that we're talking about, some of them, we may like, oh, well, that's just nothing. But if we, with intention, engage in these things, the wonderful difference that it will make for us, ourselves. And that also makes us even better in our relationships with other people, because we can kind of nudge somebody next to us and like, let me tell you what I tried and how that was helpful. There is a book, Dr. Vanderkolk, The Body Keeps the Score. It's how trauma impacts our physical bodies and our brain functioning. So it's real. And I think we need to, as a people, acknowledge that this stuff is real. I think that we are so accustomed to being superheroes So accustomed to nothing is wrong, suck it up, wipe your face, keep it moving. But we don't take the time to acknowledge we're not kind to ourselves. We can listen to other people and be just as empathic as we want to be. But for ourselves, we are often harsh. Joy, you mentioned last week. So you sometimes think about things that you've said or thought to yourself, and it's like, do I even like me? So it's really important to keep those things in mind.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie.
I know, right? Cherie?
I'm just going to take a page from Bernetta's book, Just Be Kind to Yourself, and learn to not be so hard on yourself, and just be connected with loved ones and people around you.
Dr. Tiff, you want to say anything?
Did you say me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Like, no, I'm just gonna sit here and look fabulous.
No. I did want to share that, I don't know if I said it before or not. This is not a one size fits all thing.
No, it's not.
It's just not. And we're giving suggestions that some of them you can take, some of them you can't. But I think that we should always remember to be individual, family, centered. This is a time more than ever that we need to realize that we have to be true to ourselves, but we also have to remember those that are around us, specifically in our community. Maybe in our household we start, but we need to think about our community as well. And sometimes the best coping, tactics is giving to others, checking on others, but also remembering to keep yourself first. Because if you don't do that, and when I say yourself first, I'm saying you and your household first, and know that that's the priority. So many times in the past, pre-COVID, I'll say, everything and everyone else has been the priority. And if we look at things spiritually, I do believe sometimes he puts a pause in place.
Amen.
He puts a pause in place for us to, and it's different for everybody, like I said. He may put a pause in place because we need to reconnect with family. He may put a pause in place because he knows that too much emphasis is on work and not health, and et cetera, et cetera. I can talk about that all day long. So when we're talking about our responses to trauma and COVID-19, among other things, we're also trying to get everybody to really just be in tune with who you are and what's going on within you. Everybody who follows me on social media knows that my platform is all about learning to be the expert of yourself. And this is a great time to do that. And I mean, those of y'all running 1,000 miles, I love it. But those of us that are sitting down, I love that too.
Baking cookies, yes.
Any last words, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm full of words. They just don't always come out. Oh, yeah, in the spirit of giving, I just want to give out my Cash App. One thing that I think is a great response to difficulty in your life, being depression or trauma, is humor. And everybody's frozen on my phone. Okay. Humor is important. Laughter is medicine. It really can be medicine. I have sat here trying to take a subject that is so vast and just squeeze it into an hour and then squeeze it into a little spot, but you can't squeeze trauma into anything. Because anything can be traumatic. But the responses that I've been given from my colleagues who are on the phone here, be kind to one another, take time out for yourself. These are all what's important, what we need to be doing. One thing that we have in the Black community and the Latino community is that we have this machismo thing, I'm gonna be all right. It doesn't matter what happens, I'm gonna be all right. And it's okay to be hurt. And it's okay to feel bad, and it's okay to have anxiety. And all of these things are naturally occurring in you for a reason. So this first in whatever's happening to you in your body is first in mind. And we really want to deal with whatever these traumatic events may be, because down the road they cause heart disease. Down the road they cause autoimmune diseases to manifest. So it's whatever is happening to you is going to happen mentally. Then, I mean, before you take a step, your brain has thought about every single mechanical thing that's going to happen for you to take that step, your leg to flex, your foot to come forward, all of these things. So why wouldn't the same thing happen if you have a injury? And all trauma is a injury to not your physical brain, but your emotional one. And that injury has to be healed too. So be kind to each other, be kind to yourself, have a laugh. Laughter really is medicine, especially when we're dealing with trauma. And definitely take use of these resources that we've given. Domestic violence hotline, 311. If you're in the Chicagoland area, 311 is golden. They do everything. So those will be my parting words, because there's so much I want to say, but
I know we don't have enough time for that. Well, I just want to end on saying thank you to my lovely panel again. These ladies rock. They phenomenal. Okay. A wealth of information and knowledge here that I am surrounded with. So thank you, ladies, again for your time and your energy and your input. I know that this is not in vain. I know that we are reaching people even if they're not saying anything. I just want to say on the fitness end, I just encourage you again to get up and move. Whether you get up and do 3 sets of jumping jacks for the day, I want you to accept that, as having been active for the day. And I want you to build on it, because you have to have a foundation to begin. I don't want you to beat yourself up because you're not out there running 7 million miles every day. I want you to build on your foundation from where you are. One of the things my coach used to tell us all the time is run your own race. Don't worry about someone else's capabilities and abilities and what they can or cannot do. Run your own race. And so I'm encouraging everyone in terms of fitness to run your own race. If you are starting off with 3 sets of 10 jumping jacks per day, start there, and we can always build. I tell my clients all the time, it's about me just getting clients and making money. My name is associated with you. So I need you to know what you're doing, because you represent me when you're out in the world. When you're out doing some type of exercise move and somebody asks you, who showed you how to do that? And you're going to say Joy, and you're not doing it right. That's not you're not being a good representation of me, right? And so I'm saying that you need to just go and do what's best for you at this moment, and take it and build, because there's infinite exercise possibilities that I can give you. It's so many levels of the levels of progression are infinite. The exercise possibilities and combinations, they're infinite. Okay, I can show you some stuff, baby, it blow your mind. Okay, and you'll be asking, is this humanly possible? And so it's not just about that with exercising, it's the complete person. That's why at Body Integrity Fitness, we're building a complete and healthier you, not just building you so that you look good. I want you to look good and feel good and get the benefits of what you're doing. So take whatever you're doing and make it an accomplished goal and build on that. Build a solid foundation, one where you're consistently doing something. Because you can go out there and run 10 miles tomorrow and don't do nothing else for the next 4 months. What did that achieve? You know what I mean? And just it's about being consistent with what you're doing. I would rather you do 3 sets of 10 jumping jacks every day for 3 to 4 days a week, and be consistent at that for the next few weeks, and we can start building and adding squats and then adding push-ups, because then you get consistent. And exercise is, I'm impressing upon people, stop looking at it as a chore, but look at it as a way of life, like breathing and eating and moving around, because it's something, it's not the end all be all to everything, is not, but it helps. All right. It does help elongate our lives. It does help with everything. I'm excited. I see you, Carrier. You got one more thing to say. Give me 1 minute. I'm excited to say, because God has impressed upon me to keep going with these discussions. And so next Saturday won't be our last one. I'm going to have some different panelists, and we're going to have some different topics that we're talking about in this COVID-19 environment. But my panelists know that they are welcome to be on at all. If they want to be on all of them, they can. But they don't have to be required. So I'm excited. So after Cherie on next week, when we're dealing with grief, our next topic is going to be about CBD and soap making. And so those panelists, I have 2 so far. We're going to see who else wants to join. It's actually my mom and my sister. And so it's going to be exciting. I'm very excited about that.
I'm sorry, it's on smoking weed and making soap?
CBD and making soap.
Oh, okay. I was gonna be a panelist. I'm sorry. Like, she said it's gonna be on smoking weed and making soap. I'm like, yes, I'm a professional soap maker. I mean, weed smoker.
Yeah, no, but I am, you are gonna be on that next discussion that's coming up, because I am gonna have a discussion that is centered around marijuana and some autoimmune diseases, and looking at the medical benefits of that. So I am gonna be we are going to get into that, and you will be a panelist for that.
Well, I just want to say that medicinal. I don't know about you,
right? I'm talking about
medicinal marijuana, and if you live in Illinois, legal marijuana it has been shown to improve upon people like myself who live with multiple sclerosis, who have neuropathic pain. It's a lifesaver. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on trauma. Thank you for bringing this out. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry my phone acted crazy, but it was really important. The information that you guys gave is really important. I do want to say the squats can be traumatic. So if it's making you do squats, give me a call. But really thank you for the opportunity to speak on mental health and just normalizing it in our community.
Yes.
And normalize mental health. Thank you for bringing us together. You gave me 2 additional people who I am crazy about, and the opportunity to talk to Dr. Bellamy, which, all humbles us.
Girl. Okay. So thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next Saturday here, 3:30 Central Standard Time, 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Marijuana and soap making.